So the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant has been reported to have some radiation leaks that are strong enough, get this, that are strong enough to deliver a fatal dose within 4 hours. And that's according to some Japanese authorities. Oh, man. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the Fukushima was hit by both an earthquake and a tsunami in pretty much the same relative amount of time, one right after the other. And of course, they didn't see it coming, obviously. We're just going to build this, power plant on this fault line next to the ocean. What could go wrong?
With the generators, the backup generators in the basement.
In the basement. In the basement.
Yeah.
No, what are the odds of it flooding? Really? So, according to Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority, the radiation at the water tanks at the plant have been measured at 2,200 millisieverts an hour. Now, what they've been doing is they've been hosing down the the partially melted down or melted down core of the reactor. So they've been hastily building a lot of storage tanks that are faulty, that are leaky. And so, it leaks water and it also leaks radiation. And in 2,200 millisieverts per hour, that is enough to kill somebody without protective gear within 4 hours. Ooh, oh boy. And of course, TEPCO, which is the company that owns the plant, that built the plant, that manages it. Well, these statements, these new readings that have been released, have been contrasting with previous TEPCO statements that only measured a max radiation of 100 millisieverts. Now that's a pretty big difference that you see right there. 2,200 versus 100. So why do you think it's such a big difference?
Well, first of all, the measuring equipment that they had to measure it in the first place only measured up to 100. So they were running around going, well, it's the maximum. The gauge is all the way maxed out. Just check it off on the list. You can't go any higher.
That's 100. Right.
So that's the reason that they weren't measuring any higher than 100 for weeks of continuous testing and testing and testing. But at some point, somebody must have went, it's been 100 for an awful long goddamn time, and then looked at the gauge and went, oh, well, the gauge only goes to 100, so no wonder.
Oh,
so then they retest and they find out it's 1,800, and 1,800 is 5 hours or less of death, to bring on death. And over the last several days, it went from 1,800 to 2,200, and this is after the Japanese government has become more involved in it. So either the testing has been calibrated much better, or they're just using some proper equipment now. But when you let a company provide its own oversight, this is what happens.
So what took them so long? That's what I'm wondering. What took the Japanese authorities so long to get involved?
Pride?
That's a good question. The TEPCO, I believe, is now owned by the Japanese government. But, they've just been... TEPCO has been allowed to lie by their government since the very beginning when they were detecting cesium outside of the plants. And at the same time, they're saying that there was no meltdown. And they even tried to say that they were in cold shutdown at one point.
Well, it seemed like they were encouraged to lie, actually.
That could be. But, it just seems so heavy-handed and silly to try and say that there's no meltdown when you only can detect cesium if there is a meltdown. It's just it's been that way since the beginning, and I just don't understand why TEPCO, or why the Japanese government is so hands-off. It's almost like if they get involved, they're worried that they're going to scare people or something wrong.
Well, they want to try to avoid a mass panic, because there is the possibility of a mass panic, and it's worth getting rather panicked about, because the implication there is that even people who aren't within very close proximity of the leaks, there's going to be long-term effects, over the long stretch. Even if you don't die within 4 or 5 hours, if you're in close proximity, this is going to poison the atmosphere for years and years.
Well,
we're going to see an immediate rise in birth defects. We're already seeing it.
Yeah, speaking of that, I have a friend of mine that lives in Tokyo. He's a documentary filmmaker, and after the earthquake and tsunami, he grabbed his camera and went up north. And, you know, he made some good friends with the families up there, and they take him in and let him stay with them while he's visiting. And now that he's been going there for about 2 years, these parents are having their children tested in Fukushima Prefecture, and they're all coming back with these huge abnormal amounts of thyroid cysts and nodules. The government had testing centers, and of course when the kids went to these government testing centers, they were fine, you know. But when they got their own independent studies, they're all sick. It's just horrible, and I don't think we have any idea.
Well, that's absolutely disturbing that the government tests would come back absolutely negative. That sounds diabolical. I mean, downright diabolical.
Well,
from what I've seen, there's a lot of this going on to prevent the panic.
But I was going to say,
but also it could also be partly because they might actually know exactly how bad it is, and it might be worse than we even think. And they might be trying to prevent everyone from leaving Japan. Because, I mean, seriously, mass panic, everyone get the hell out now kind of, you know, reaction from people. I think at this point it might be warranted. If I lived in Japan, I'd move.
Yeah, I saw a story about a apartment building.
You'd hope that you could afford to, but you know, you can say that, Ray, and I love you for it, but I'm telling you right now, if somebody said, you know, hey, there's this, you know, Florida's going to be sinking in the water in a few days, it would cost every dime we had to leave when the gas prices are $4 a gallon. You know what I'm saying?
No, there's a lot of people in Fukushima Prefecture that can't leave. The government actually made the exclusion zone smaller to make sure, well, I mean, one of the effects is less people can get government aid to get out. There's tons of people trapped in Fukushima Prefecture that just can't get out. They have their jobs there. They've sent their families away, and they're just stuck there, and it's really sad.
Right, and I was going to get back to saying to the workers that are trying to stabilize what's left of the plant and to prevent it from getting even worse, which I can't imagine how much worse it could really get, that they're exposed to 1,800% more radiation than they were actually told with those faulty, you know, those Geiger counters.
And they're going to pay with their lives.
But
they absolutely are.
Those paper suits they're wearing should help them now.
Oh, of course.
They probably will.
Yeah, something tells me like maybe the Japanese government's just trying to get away with this for 15 years before everybody starts dying, you know?
The Nuclear Regulation Authority chairman, a guy named Shunichi Tanaka, he said, no, that's okay, guys. No, it's just TEPCO. They're inadequate. They're dumb. Don't worry, no mass panic. He says TEPCO's inadequate expertise caused it to misrepresent key radiation data about the leaks and suggested it needed more hands-on guidance. Tanaka says TEPCO improperly described the radioactivity of hotspots recently found near water storage tanks using a unit that measures potential human exposure levels instead of one that measures the levels of the radioactivity of the water itself. So, you know, there's the government down there trying to say, no, nothing to worry about. Don't worry, we got it. And, you know, that's just indicative of the mindset of, you know, the Japanese government when it comes to Fukushima.